Okay, so friends, welcome to NMBF Coffee Chats, the place where we gather or twice a week to discuss issues, topics, subjects that are relevant to us as people, living in the society and as part of our nation also. And so today we are really glad to have with us George Mathew, whose book, The Complete AI Guide for Small and Medium Businesses, is coming up, will be soon released on 1st October. And we're very happy that he's come here to speak on this topic on how AI can be harnessed for small and medium businesses. So over to George Mathew, who will also be introducing himself here.
All right, Abhijit, thank you very much. And thanks, everyone. I should say good morning. It's 1:30 a.m. here in Sydney, but good evening to each one of you. My name is George Mathew. I'm originally born in Kerala, worked in Mumbai, worked around the world, and finally ended up here in Sydney, where I've been working with multiple companies, and I'll share that in a bit. Today, I want to talk about um, the topic of the book, which is largely on AI. And I've been working in this space for many years. And the reason why I picked or the focus to be on small businesses is also because that if you look at the trends, you find that the large companies are still struggling to figure out what to do with this because of the impact that it has and the consequences of it. And I'll go through some of those trends as well. What I'm hoping that you would get from it is basically, bring AI to the level of ordinary citizens, and then see what you can do the next level from there, which is really small businesses and medium businesses. Because I'm convinced that one of the ways that you can bolster growth is through harnessing that sector or that segment of our industry. Here in Australia, for example, the small medium business is pretty much the backbone of our economy. We've got about 65,000 small businesses. I'm sure India will have probably millions. And so if you use some of these capabilities to actually drive their growth, especially from marketing perspectives, from cost reduction, customer experience, and so on, there is significant benefits to be had. So let me just introduce myself to you. I have been working in this space for many years. I'm currently focused as an AI strategist, where I help businesses of all shapes and sizes, and mostly focused on digital AI and enterprise innovation. That's my background. I'm passionate about making AI accessible to everyone, practically, and mostly from a human-centered perspective. So this book is my second book. My first book was in 2010, published in the UK, focusing on innovation networks. And one of the theses I had was about looking at how some countries are more innovative than others. And I made the case that the key driving force or catalyst for India would be to look at grassroots and level innovation, however small that may be, so that you can enhance the potential of our village folk and people who live in the B class and the C class cities and so on and so forth. So that was the thesis of that book. And that's been taught in many universities and referenced widely in the academic world. And this book is more about looking at how we can harness AI. And so there's some commonalities in there. So in terms of my background, I started as a reporter at Indian Express. I used to work in Mumbai. And it's very interesting, after doing a degree in electrical engineering, that was a bit of a detour from what people traditionally do. But that gave me the opportunity to access
Hello.
every IT company that came into India. So I had the opportunity to meet the leadership of pretty much everyone who came to India at that time and the IT industry as you know today. And I used to work in a company called Gartner, and that's an interesting segue because the last time um, when everyone got interested in technology was when Y2K happened. We had talk about, if you remember, how because the number of digits that you stored in a computer system were only limited to two, and when the year 2000 came, you needed four digits, and therefore you needed to rewrite all the software you have been writing for the past or the previous 100 years. And so there was this whole doomsday prediction about, how aircraft will fall from the sky
Yeah.
and nuclear reactors will go off the rails and so on and so forth. And to a large part, none of that happened. But everyone was very switched on to it. So AI is very similar to that. And the reason why I talked about Gartner is one of the companies that actually promoted the idea that, it's going to be catastrophic and so on and so forth. And I had the opportunity to work with that firm to understand how they come up with these predictions. I worked in Infosys for 16 years after that as a senior director for digital. And then I worked with IBM as well. But the key interest in AI developed when I worked in a small startup called Lex, which was actually building diagnostic software using AI for aircraft, which is largely airplanes and ships and wind turbines. And so that's what that was about. I worked with them for about 6 years, and that's what really got the interest in getting to know this technology and what it can do. So that's my background. I thought that was important to really um, give you that understanding as to where I'm coming from in terms of putting together a book like this, and also the implications of that when it comes and the applications of that in wider society. Interestingly, as I was talking about the Y2K problem, on the 7th of September, just 2 weeks ago, there was this play that happened here in Sydney called Doomers, which is basically a play around what happened with OpenAI and Sam Altman in the tussles they had in the boardrooms, in the context of what to do with AI. Should it be a non-profit kind of venture, or should it be a profitable venture, and so on. So there was a play taken on that, and to my surprise, the 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 theater was full, and you had people who were parents and artists and students and professors and people who are from all walks of life in the theater. And one of the reasons I was invited was I was on the panel along with some of the academicians and so on and so forth. And I've never seen that level of engagement ever before for technology themes. And this was on a Sunday afternoon and on Father's Day. Yet the whole theater was full. So everyone is so engaged and switched on with this concept because either they fear it or they embrace it. And so there are also people in the middle who say, let's see what happens and we'll figure it out. But like Y2K, and probably technology trends since then, like the internet or the dot-com era or mobility or social media and what have you, you saw several waves of those technologies. But here is something that is really an opportunity and a threat. And so to understand enough of it is basically an asset for anyone who's looking at a topic like this. So having given that background, the big question is, has AI moved beyond the futuristic dream to everyday reality? And the reason that is an important question is that in the past, we see sci-fi movies, and probably that is where AI lived. But there are three particular trends that actually made it possible for this whole technology, which is suddenly visible. So AI is not new. It's been there since 1960s and 50s. But largely that all of AI resided within labs, but became mainstream and it became part of everyone's vocabulary when ChatGPT uh, was launched in 2023. Before that, people never even thought about AI, but AI was there everywhere, but hidden from the public, right? So there's this massive sort of interest because of ChatGPT and what ChatGPT can do. But if you look at the history of AI, it's always been in our software products and so on and so forth, as I will outline later. But but if you ask why is it so, why did it come out of the closet as it were? It's because of three main reasons. One is that the cost of computing power has reduced. Cloud computing became widely available, which means that you can have access to massive servers at a much lower cost, and you can scale it and also shrink it based on what you need. And of course, the third reason was the proliferation of data, which you have in tremendous volumes to train some of these algorithms. And so these are the three reasons why it became um, accessible, it became prolific, and so on. But then with the announcement of simple user interfaces like ChatGPT and all of that, the interest really peaked, and it became more of a marketing kind of success for all of AI, if you ask me. Um, and today it's a reality. So the answer is yes, but success would mean understanding the nuances. Like for example, I think there is in one of my slides, there is a study that came early this year which said that 88% of AI projects in large companies fail. And last month, there was another study that came in which said that 95% of AI projects are failing. In fact, 4 weeks ago, one of our largest banks here in Australia reversed their AI initiative because they were trying to use AI for customer service, and it was basically not taking the calls and responding to calls as they were expecting. So they shut the whole program down, and they're looking at other things to do. And there are reasons for that. But where AI, at the same time, with high numbers of so-called failures or lack of progression from pilots to production, you're also finding that 95% of employees in a company are using productivity tools with AI. So there is this gap between individual productivity versus industrial level scale productivity, which is the chasm that you're trying to kind of navigate through. The good thing with small businesses, though, is that because you're using these tools at the individual productivity level, for small businesses, the challenges are far, far less than the large companies because of the cultural change required to actually embrace um, technology across the organization. And also with unionized workforce, it's become very challenging for larger organizations. But smaller organizations, you're faster, agile, you're nimble, and therefore, if the leadership agrees to use some of these tools, it becomes so faster to basically implement, and that's the advantage that small businesses have. And so, having said that, there is a whole bunch of reasons why small businesses are not using AI, or I can even say, you're not seeing that proliferation of these tools happening in other sectors. And that's largely because there are myths to say that, it's too expensive. In fact, most of the tools that are available are like, does not even cost one full-time employee's wages. And if you look at the productivity, it can be 10 times more than that. That's largely because of cloud computing, for example. There are some tools like, for example, the presentation that I'm using here today is actually completely built on AI. And so PowerPoint has got significant competition now. And that tool is costing me less than $20 a month, which has got a whole raft of features. You can run social media, you can actually build documents, you can do a whole bunch of other things. So from a personal productivity perspective, it's got 10x kind of benefits for some of these productivity tools. And so the notion that it is expensive is no longer a valid argument. People say it's too complex. And so one of the things you're finding is that most modern AI tools are user-friendly and usually no code, which means you don't have to program with simple interfaces, as you all experience with ChatGPT, for example. The real challenge is actually in change management and making sure that large corporations adopt it and so on and so forth. So it's not really complex. The whole idea of these tools are that the human interaction with those systems, with the machines, have to be kind of very easy and easy to follow and so on and so forth. So it's not complex from that perspective, but the backend can be very, very complex. The other argument is that it's a job killer. Um, and that has got two sides of the arguments. Whenever there's a new technology that comes in, there are obviously recalibration of jobs. You've seen it in ATM machines when they came. The way tellers stop. Banks never had not tellers anymore as much as it used to be, for example. Or faster cars and horse carriages became replaced by cars and then trains and so on and so forth. So every technology change you'll find that there is some job loss that happens, but also it opens up a whole raft of opportunities. And so that myth that it's a job killer is also not always, it has to be qualified because it helps a lot of people to improve their productivity. And then, like I said, the same example of these tool that I talked about, as a strategy consultant, we used to spend 4 weeks to 5 weeks to actually put together a board level presentation to a client. And that's the effort it took to kind of get the structure together, get the images together, and all of that stuff. But now with AI tools, you can do it in 20 minutes. So then the question is that even in your consulting business, the productivity it gives at individual levels have kind of gone about 50 times. So that means that some of the junior staff that you used to rely on for these kind of tasks are no longer needed. So there is a recalibration in terms of what kind of skills you need and so on and so forth. And of course, it is in many sense a hidden revolution because a lot of the tools that we already use have AI in them. We don't realize it. Like, for example, the spam filters we have. Banks have been using AI-like type technologies for many years for detecting fraud. So, for example, there's an anomalous transaction that happens. There's an algorithm that picks it and flags it to an analyst and who intervenes. Those are all AI. Office 365 has just the word, Microsoft Word itself has got many AI tools embedded in it that we've been using for many years, just that we haven't called it AI. And therefore, there is this notion that this new thing is coming to kind of attack the rest of us and so on and so forth. Whereas it's been a slow revolution all this while. And with ChatGPT, of course, it kind of boomed and everyone knows about it. Google also has it, email sorting, for example, calendar scheduling, insights, all use machine learning and these tools before. In CRM, you can also find that there's a lot of those new technologies coming in. Marketing functions are becoming extinct. That's another area that you're finding a lot of jobs changing because you can now build creatives using AI tools as opposed to relying on a graphic artist to really build that up for you. So there is a lot of efficiencies being driven there. But again, point here being that a lot of our tools that we use today already has an AI in it, even though we recognize it and know it as AI. For large companies and bigger companies, the biggest challenge is, it's like an iceberg, right? For larger companies, they have a lot more issues that they have to deal with. Like if you look at the right-hand side, because they have tons and tons of data, that data also has bias in it. So for example, if your workforce has been using workarounds instead of following standard procedures to actually do the work, the data that your systems capture actually captures those biases or those individual people who did the workarounds in it. And so when you use AI, it basically becomes faster and more efficient and much bigger in terms of execution. In other words, you multiply the bias. So when we deployed our software in Germany, for example, we found that the technicians who were fixing airplanes had a little book that they carried in the back of their pocket, which they're not allowed to. And then what they do is whatever they write in the book, they actually they transfer that into the systems. So whatever biases you develop within small work groups get ingested into the system. And when you use that data to do predictions, you're basically amplifying those biases. So for larger companies, there's a bigger issue, and a lot of those issues lie under the iceberg, like data cleansing that they need to do. They need proper governance, bias, and I talk about bias and ethical issues in a few slides down. But what a lot of companies are selling is flashy demos and turnkey solutions and saying that you can solve problems and so on and so forth. And so that hasn't really happened. That is why numbers like the 88% of pilots not moving in larger companies is becoming a reality, or 95% number, depending on whose research you follow. But there are ways of actually working around those things. You can, if you focus on solving problems with some of these technologies and ignore the marketing, flashy PowerPoint ware, and actually look at problems to solve, there are a lot of people solving problems. In my own experience, in the 6 years that we were working, we've deployed diagnostic software to identify faults with planes and ships and wind turbines very effectively in the last 6 years. And I still remember 2021 when we were deploying it. This is much before ChatGPT came into the world. There was COVID and we couldn't travel to the client. So all of the walking the floor and identifying customer pain points were all done remotely. In fact, from this room, we used to work in wind farms in the US and deploy AI solutions. And now it's widely used in about 400 different turbines to actually identify anomalies. Even before you have a shutdown, you can actually identify what is likely to happen and fix that before it even happens. So we are able to use those models to actually troubleshoot and also do predictive maintenance. And so you can solve problems using some specific techniques like, identifying the problems and trying to solve those problems using technologies, as opposed to just, getting excited with the technology and doing that. And this is not a new issue with technology. You have to go through that change management and a whole bunch of other things to basically make it work. And if you do that, you can still get very good success. So the art of framing the right problem is an elusive thing in the IT industry, because what people do is you call a vendor and say, can you fix the problem? And every vendor will say they can. And so as a decision maker, the biggest challenge for you is to say who to believe. And that's happening in AI as well. So everyone would add in their marketing message that they are AI enabled, but you need to have a capability to understand what is what and how can we use these technologies to solve problems. I don't want to get into too much of technical solutioning area, but I just wanted to say that all AI is not the same. AI can be used in 3 modes particularly. One is in automation, which is that if you know an outcome, a predeterministic outcome, then you typically use automation. An example of that is that you have, say, for example, you want to send invoices at the end of the month on a particular date. So you know who the invoices are going to, you know what the invoices are, and what the invoices contain. You can automate a lot of that stuff. Chances of it going wrong is very less. And even something goes wrong, you can easily fix it. In other words, your risk appetite or risk parameters are very low. And so you can use AI from an automation perspective. And predominantly at the moment, a lot of the AI systems that you find are in the automation space. And by the way, this is not robotic process automation, RPA. This is more about using algorithms to see patterns and then working on those. So there's a slight difference there. On the other hand, you have something called the agents. Agents are basically, you don't decide what the outcome is. And even the system itself do not know what the outcome would be. You're just letting loose these technologies to find an outcome for you. They're autonomous systems. They're like driverless cars. An example of an autonomous or an agent would be that you want to find, for example, the most optimized route for your trucking. Suppose you're a food delivery company and you build an agent to say, find my most optimal route for taking product A from point A to point B. Take into consideration whether your traffic system, traffic inputs and a whole bunch of things. The system will go and find out what is the most optimal. And you can't predict which direction it will take you through because you can't program that. And that's the difference, isn't it, between AI and other systems? Because in AI systems, you're not actually programming for the outcomes. the system decides which pathway to take, and agentic systems are the ones that actually do that a lot more efficiently, because you're not doing predetermined outputs. You're letting the system define that for you. So that's the other extreme. And in the middle, of course, there is the augmentation piece, which means that it is a collaboration between the machine and the humans. They work together to basically find the outcome. A classic example is what I'm doing today. I'm making a presentation, but the slides were made by using an AI tool, or a doctor using um, a diagnostic software to understand a patient's diagnostic symptoms and say what are the possible issues that patient may have, but making a final decision. In other words, the decision is a human decision, but to assist in that decision using a system. So that's a middle ground called augmentation. So if you look at the world today, most of the system deployments that are happening in AI is in automation or augmentation. Agentic AI is still elusive because you don't know how some of those predictions can happen. Because machines have the capacity to uh, you know think, reason to a high degree, and that's what leads to that uncertainty. And so you're not confident of the outcomes in agentic systems, and you cannot release some of those autonomous um, software, especially where your risks are higher. You're definitely not going to trust it as your medical advisor, for example. So we have not reached that level of maturity, although the systems are capable of doing work autonomously for you. It's like the classic example: if you had a driverless car running in Mumbai or Delhi, would you get into it? It's a question, right? So, would you trust a system that drives by itself? So that's a challenge. Technically, you might; it has the capability, but do you trust it is a question. So, so these are the different modes, and choosing the right mode based on your risk tolerance and your needs and so on is the challenge for an AI strategist to basically help some of these companies. And I talked about what they call pilot purgatory, which is really there are lots of pilots that are happening, so much so that many of these large companies have lot of um, proof of concepts that they have done, but it's not moving beyond that. That's largely because scale is a different beast by itself. So some of these technologies don't scale. So you can get everyone to use ChatGPT, which is easy, but then you can't see what the net effect of the productivity is for different departments and so on and so forth. Of course, you can add the increments, but at the process level, you still have challenges in terms of scaling some of these technologies. And a lot of that has got to with the human aspects of technology. It's like ownership. What we find is that leadership, the C-suite are less aware of these capabilities, and some of them are disinterested to know, and therefore their teams are unable to utilize them for productivity and so on and so forth. So championship is a problem. Change management is a big problem, which is why you see statistics like 95% of pilots don't go beyond that. So there are techniques and ways to get over this by thinking, planning, and all of that, which is what everyone needs to do, rather than go for the shiny tool, the most shiny tool out there in the market. Whereas when you look at the small businesses, the benefit that the small businesses have is that all of these problems are smaller for them. And so they're able to extend the individual productivity that you're seeing to larger operations. Example would be, like I talked about, your invoicing systems. A lot of that can be automated. All of your marketing can be automated. In fact, you can now write software code using systems like cloud and other AI systems, which you would have to go and hire a software programmer to write the code for you. That you can do without having a human there. So these are the ways that you can use a lot of these tools at the small business level. But for large companies, some of the challenges are these massive challenges. The other thing is about leading with purpose. one of the things that you find is that I talked about bias before, I talked about ethics of it before. While AI drives efficiency, one of the reasons why a lot of companies are not adopting it is because of these two things, the bias and um, the ethics part of it. Classically, there was two cases um, that was very prominent. One is Workday. I don't know whether you've read it recently. That Workday is a software that allows you to do recruitments. So there was a case about of a man, an African American man who applied for jobs, over 100 applications. And wherever Workday was used, he was not even called for an interview. So in other words, they were able to trace it back to the inherent bias in the process that that kind of filtered him out because of his ethnicity and background. So we are seeing some of those um, trends in some of these products. So the Workday case is a classic one. And then last year there was another case of another lady who was trying to get um, a house on rent, and because she didn't meet certain social and economic parameters, the application itself was not progressed beyond, before, and just filtered out. And so the case, and she won the case, and I think it was a $2 million award to her. So you're finding that there are these systems that fail, algorithms that fail, and we don't have a legal and judiciary system that can cater to that. You can't take a machine to court, right? So that framework is not built. We don't know we don't yet know who can be held accountable. And so there is a gray area in terms of, how much you can trust the machine and how much, humans still need to make decisions. And therefore, there is a need for leadership to actually lead with purpose. And when you deploy these systems, we need to look at the social implications of it, the ethical implications of it in terms of, how some of these systems can actually behave. So responsible leadership becomes an important piece in terms of implementation of these technologies. And so I think the key is, while these systems can solve people's problems, it's about taking a human-centered approach, which is about empathy and realizing that some of these machines can never replace humans, especially in areas where human connection is important, like in the medical field or in education or in customer relationships and those kind of areas. It is also important to protect customer data. Not only customer data, even our own data. There was a case of Samsung, for example, classic case of Samsung, where the employees uploaded all of their futuristic roadmap for some of their products in ChatGPT. The company didn't know that was happening. So all that data has gone into the public domain because some of these tools are hosted outside your country, outside your company, and so on and so forth. So that data is lost forever. I don't know if any of you use LinkedIn recently. There is a new feature that's come in where they can use your profile data to actually train the algorithm. So if you don't want that to happen, you have to go and change the setting to say, don't use my data to train the algorithm, right? So every software that you see in the market is also trying to use your data to actually train their systems. And so when you deploy these systems, we have to be conscious about whether we are, impinging on these things. And that's another aspect for us. If you are in leadership and are planning to use these technologies, you need to have a clear policy for your employees in terms of what you can upload and what you can't, even on ChatGPT, for instance, because the data, once it's uploaded, is gone. And it's stored somewhere else and so on and so forth. So there is the personal data part of it, and also your company IP and so on and so forth as well. So there are ways to work around that because you can have your own instance of some of these tools, which is isolated from the internet and public systems. The other thing is about fairness. I think I talked about fairness before in those two cases. One of the biggest problems, again, is transparency, especially when it comes to agentic AI. You have the problem of explainability. You can't explain how the system has arrived at a certain decision. So that's become a big problem for a lot of people. So until we get a better grasp of how the algorithms function, in fact, on the panel that I was in on September 7th, two of the fellow panelists were researchers and neuroscientists, and they were saying that nobody knows how the algorithms actually work. Even the scientists don't know how it works. So especially from an agentic perspective, the tool, you don't know how they actually come up with the outcomes. And so if you let these machines loose, there is always this doubt and fear that it might kind of go out of hand. And that is a real possibility. Whereas in the two other modes that I talked about, the automation and human in the loop, the automation, the outcomes are predetermined. In the human in the loop, the human makes a decision. But if you let the machines to make a decision all the time, you still have a problem. And transparency is a big issue when it comes to that kind of a mode. In fact, that whole play was about, the computer taking over and starting to fly planes and stuff like that, which is in theory possible. And so we have to have guardrails around. Yeah, so use AI to unlock the human potential, but not replace it. And that's very key for everyone, especially in markets like India, for example, where labor is a key piece of our GDP. And so those of us who are in responsible position, our focus should not be about retrenching people, but rather giving them capacity to work more efficiently so that you can do more with less, while empowering these people to be better employees. And so the key takeaways, just to wrap up things, are that AI is here and accessible. Organizational, and most of the issues are organizational and not really technical. Most pilots fail, especially in large organizations, due to poor change management. But smaller companies have a big advantage to basically scale up and take these technologies and use it. Focusing on the real problem and not flashy tech is a key prescription. And of course, you need to balance efficiency with human values, and that's key to using these systems. I don't know whether you already know, but a lot of companies are already using voice agents to book appointments, for example, and ring customers and so on and so forth, as an example, right? So those technologies are getting mature, as an example, for small businesses. And there is a bunch of use cases that I have, and if anyone is interested, please reach out, and I'm happy to work with you on any of those. So in summary, the AI journey can start now. It can start small, think strategic, and lead with purpose. Remember the human aspect of, you don't want the machine to lead you, but use it, and you can use it for improving productivity. The question is not whether AI will transform a business. It will. We're already seeing that. Whether you lead the transformation with wisdom, courage, or humanity is a question, because that's where the ethical questions come in. So the question is, are you ready to move beyond this? Most of what I told you is part of a podcast which you can access for free of cost. And that's how to reach me. So a lot of the contents of the book, if you don't want to buy the book and use the book or read the book, you can actually access on the podcast, which is widely and freely available. It's a 15-minute bite-sized podcast. So it's built for commute friendly. So you don't have to even look at your system. You can listen. So there's a lot of use cases there for small businesses and examples that you can use, which can take us to the as a follow-on on this conversation. Do we want to break and come back, Abhijit, or I just had one more slide. Yeah.
Okay, I think if you want to finish that, that's fine. Then we'll have a separate recording section for Q&A.
Okay. Now, all I was going to say that, look, if you want to support the work I do, so I do this voluntarily for a lot of companies and on a pro bono basis. And the way I do that is by finding clients to support, and that subsidizes the voluntary work I do and the pro bono work I do. So you can support my work by ordering a copy, or there are other coaching and mentoring sessions that I offer. For example, personal productivity, team productivity, and so on. I do education sessions for small business leadership and also boards. I'm doing that in Malaysia, Singapore, Philippines, and India. And also AI governance and strategy and roadmap. So these are the different avenues in which I'm trying to get the word out. And for organizations that are charitable and so on and so forth, I want to subsidize the work that I do for them by charging people who can. So depending on which bucket you belong to, I'm happy to help. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Friends, we will now go into the next section, that's Q&A. And if George can stop the screen share. Yeah.
I'm just trying to
So,
figure out how to do that. Yeah.
okay, okay. Yeah. So in case some of you are here for the first time, and or if you've never heard about NNBF Coffee Chats, then you could connect with us. That's our link there. But if you are already, I think no. Okay, I'm posting the link first of Brother George's book that is to be released on Amazon. It will be released on 1st October. And if you want to click, you can pre-order that by clicking that link. Okay. Yeah. And now that's our NNBF Coffee Chats connections for anybody who wants to get in touch with us. But if you're already on certain groups, so you're getting our uh, notices, Zoom links, then that's fine. You don't need to join this here. Thank you. All right. Now we'll go into the next